On the morning of March 4th, 2022, the house in Francis, Utah was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Not peaceful. Not the kind of quiet that greets you on a slow Sunday morning, when the light comes in soft and the world seems to be holding its breath in a good way. This was a different kind of quiet. Heavy. Still. The kind of stillness that presses against your chest before your mind has had time to understand why. Kouri Richins stood in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a copper mug, the kind people use for Moscow mules. The condensation had already begun to bead and slide down its polished surface, gathering at the base like tiny droplets of something unsaid. The copper was cold in her palms. She may have noticed that. She may have noticed nothing at all. Upstairs, her 3 sons were still sleeping. Boys aged 9, 7, and 5. Young enough that the world still felt like a safe place. Young enough that a parent's presence in the doorway is the only guarantee they need that everything is okay. Downstairs, in the master bedroom, their father Eric wasn't moving, and hadn't been for hours. But to understand what happened in that house, to truly understand it, you have to go back much further than the morning of March 4th. You have to go back to the beginning of a marriage, a business, a secret, and a plan that quietly unraveled over years before it reached its brutal conclusion. Because this story is not just about one night. It's about everything that led to that night. Before there was a crime, there was a man. Eric Richins was 39 years old when he died. He co-owned a successful stonemasonry business and was by all accounts the kind of man who built things, literally and figuratively. He built walls, structures, foundations. He was steady, methodical, reliable. His family described him as present, the kind of father who showed up, the kind of husband who believed in doing things right, even when doing things right was slow. People who knew Eric described him with the same word, over and over: stable. In a world that increasingly rewards the loud, the flashy, and the fast, Eric was the quiet kind of dependable that holds a family together. He and Kouri had built a life in the foothills outside Park City, Utah. A part of the country where the mountains rise up around you and life, from the outside at least, can look impossibly picturesque. 3 boys, a big house, 2 careers. And on the surface, the appearance of success. But surfaces, as we will come to see, can be the most dangerous things of all. Kouri was different from Eric in almost every way that mattered. Where he was steady, she was restless. Where he believed in building slowly, she was drawn to speed. To the rush of a real estate deal closing, to the feeling of numbers climbing, to the idea of a life that felt bigger than the one she was currently living. She started her own business, Kouri Richins Realty, a house-flipping enterprise launched around 2019. At first, it looked like a success story. She was ambitious, energetic, clearly driven. But ambition without financial discipline is a dangerous combination. Here is what was happening behind the scenes. While the family photo albums were being filled and the neighborhood saw a picture-perfect life, Kouri had taken out a $250,000 home equity line of credit against the family home. In Eric's name, signed by her as his attorney, in fact. According to prosecutors, Eric had no idea. That money seeded Kouri Richins Realty. In 2019, the business handled 1 project. By 2021, she was managing 15 renovations simultaneously. That kind of expansion sounds impressive. But the numbers told a different story. Forensic accountant Brooke Carrington, who reviewed hundreds of thousands of financial documents for the prosecution, testified that Kouri's business was imploding. She was overdrafting accounts, writing more than $300,000 in bounced checks to contractors, and attempting to pay herself $60,000 at one point when there was simply nothing there. By the time Eric died in March 2022, Kouri owed approximately $7.5 million in debt and was making payments of roughly $80,000 every single month. Her bank account was, in the accountant's words, perpetually in the hole. Her net worth the day after her husband's death? Negative $1.6 million. She was building a palace on sand, and the tide was already coming in. The money problems didn't exist in isolation. Around the same time Kouri's business was cracking, her marriage was doing the same. Marriages don't usually collapse dramatically. They erode, like rock against water, slowly, imperceptibly, until one day you look and realize the cliff edge is much closer than you thought. Eric had begun to suspect something was deeply wrong. In October 2020, he met with an estate planning attorney, alleging his wife had engaged in ongoing abuse and misuse of his finances. A month later, he removed Kouri as the beneficiary of his $500,000 life insurance policy and transferred their home and his company interest into a trust, overseen not by Kouri, but by his sister, for the benefit of his 3 children. Think about what that means. A husband who no longer trusts his wife with his assets. A man quietly restructuring his entire estate to protect his children from the woman who shared his bed. Both Eric and Kouri separately consulted divorce attorneys. He in 2020, she in 2021. Neither filed. Why not? The answer for Kouri, according to trial testimony, was fear. Not of Eric, but of financial ruin. A prenuptial agreement was in place. Friends testified she feared that if she divorced Eric, he would end up financially secure, and her the opposite. One friend, Allison Wright, testified that Kouri told her she felt trapped. Not physically. Not emotionally in the traditional sense. Trapped by math. Trapped by a life built on someone else's financial stability, with the terrifying realization that without him, the whole structure collapses. Another friend, Becky Lloyd, testified to something even more chilling. She said that in December 2021, just 3 months before Eric's death, Kouri told her she couldn't see an easy way forward out of the marriage. And then Lloyd added this. She said that in many ways, it would be better if he were dead. That sentence sat in that courtroom like a stone dropped into still water. Into this fracturing marriage walked Robert Josh Grossman. Grossman had served in the U.S. military during the Iraq War. He entered Kouri's life around 2020, initially helping her flip houses, living in the properties during renovation, paid in lump sums. Their relationship became something else entirely. These were 2 people who, in their private messages, talked about a future together, about love, about possibility. On February 15th, 2022, the day after Valentine's Day, and one day after prosecutors say Kouri made her first attempt on her husband's life, she sent Grossman a message. If I was divorced right now and asked you to marry me tomorrow, you would? He replied, yes, in love with you, of course I would. On the night before Eric Richins died, Grossman sent Kouri a gif of 2 people kissing with the caption, love you. Hours later, Eric was dead. The prosecution also surfaced something that, given what we now know, carries a weight that is hard to ignore. Around the time of their messages, Kouri asked Grossman if he had ever killed anyone. He had served in combat. She asked how it made him feel. Grossman testified he didn't think much of it at the time. He answered and moved on. But in retrospect, the question doesn't move on so easily. In early 2022, Kouri began seeking a specific kind of drug. She reached out to her housekeeper, a woman named Carmen Lauber, asking first for hydrocodone, telling her it was for an investor, then escalating to something stronger. She used a phrase prosecutors would later repeat in open court. She asked for the Michael Jackson stuff. Everyone knows what happened to Michael Jackson. And Kouri, prosecutors argued, knew exactly what that name meant. Lauber testified she purchased fentanyl pills for Kouri from a dealer named Robert Crozier. Cell phone data placed both of them near the same gas station in Draper, Utah on February 11th, February 26th, and March 9th, 2022. Before Valentine's Day. After Valentine's Day. and 5 days after Eric's death. After Eric died, Lauber called Kouri. "Please tell me these pills were not for him," she said. And Kouri replied, "No, they were not." Eric passed away from a brain aneurysm. A lie delivered calmly to the woman who had just sold her the weapon. March 4th was not the first time Kouri allegedly tried to kill her husband. According to a search warrant affidavit, Eric's sister testified that during a trip to Greece, Kouri gave Eric a drink, and he became violently ill. He called his sister afterward and told her he believed Kouri had tried to kill him. He suspected it. He said it out loud, and he stayed. Then came Valentine's Day, 2022. Kouri brought Eric a sandwich. He took one bite. His friends later testified Eric called them that day, saying he felt like he was going to die. He broke out in hives. He could barely breathe. He recovered. Prosecutors alleged that sandwich contained fentanyl. Less than 3 weeks later, Eric Richins was dead. On February 4th, 2022, 10 days before the Valentine's Day attempt, a new life insurance policy on Eric went into effect. Kouri had applied for it. She had named herself the beneficiary, and according to prosecutors, she had forged Eric's signature on the application. Eric had already removed her from his original policy and restructured his estate to cut her out. So she went around him. A secret policy. A forged name. 10 days later, a poisoned sandwich. A month after that, the Moscow Mule. Eric Richins was worth approximately $2.2 million in life insurance at the time of his death. After his passing, Kouri received approximately $1.3 to $1.4 million in payouts. By September 2022, less than 6 months later, most of it was gone, swallowed by debt. And $25,000 of that insurance money went directly to Robert Josh Grossman. The night before Eric died was unremarkable. No dramatic argument, no final confrontation. Grossman had planned to have brunch with Kouri the next morning to celebrate a recent property closing. The night of March 3rd, he sent her that gif. "Love you." Hours later, Eric was gone. According to Kouri's own statement to law enforcement, she made Eric a Moscow Mule that evening to celebrate the property deal. He drank it in their bedroom. Later, after one of her sons had a nightmare, she went to sleep in the children's room. In the early morning hours of March 4th, she called 911 and reported finding Eric cold in their bed. First responders arrived. Eric Richins, a healthy 39-year-old man with no known history of drug use, was pronounced dead on the scene. The autopsy revealed the cause of death: a lethal dose of fentanyl. Not just a lethal dose. 5 times a lethal dose. As the prosecutor would later tell the jury, the amount of fentanyl in his system shows that Kouri Richins wanted Eric not only dead, but good and dead. What happened next is the part of this story that captured public attention and revealed something deeply unsettling about the space between who we appear to be and who we actually are. Kouri Richins didn't fall apart. She performed. She was the grieving widow. She cried. She comforted her children. She accepted condolences. She appeared on television programs and spoke about loss, about love, about raising 3 sons without their father. She told the world her husband had died of a brain aneurysm. And then she sat down and wrote a children's book. She titled it, "Are You With Me?" It follows a young boy who has lost his father. Kouri said she wrote it to help her children process the unexpected loss. She appeared on a Utah lifestyle program called Good Things Utah in April 2023, just weeks before her arrest, and spoke about how she couldn't find books to help her sons understand what had happened. So she wrote one herself. People admired her for it. The book became a symbol of resilience, of a mother's love, of something good growing from something terrible. But symbols can be constructed. And sometimes, what looks like transformation is actually concealment. because in the months following Eric's death, investigators recovered dozens of online searches on a phone Kouri began using in April 2022. What is a lethal dose of fentanyl? Misspelled. The way someone types in a hurry or in panic. If someone is poisoned, what does it go down on the death certificate as? Also misspelled. Poisoned rendered as poisoned. How investigators recovered deleted messages. Remotely deleting cell phone data. Women's prisons in Utah. Life insurance payments. And then, Kouri Richins' net worth. She searched for herself. As if having committed the ultimate act, she needed to know what the world thought she had gained. She didn't search if someone accidentally overdosed, prosecutor Brad Bloodworth told the jury. She doesn't search if somebody is dead for unknown reasons. She searches if somebody is poisoned. Because that is what happened. Kouri Richins lived as a free woman for more than a year after Eric's death. She received the insurance payouts. She spent most of the money. She promoted her book on local television. Then, on May 8, 2023, 14 months after Eric died, she was arrested. Charged with aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder, forgery, and 2 counts of insurance fraud. When Dateline NBC reached out for comment, Kouri had a message she wanted delivered. This means war, not the words of someone devastated by false accusation. A declaration of combat. She pleaded not guilty to all charges. The trial began in February 2026, nearly 4 years after Eric's death. The prosecution called more than 40 witnesses. The defense called 0. Kouri did not testify. The forensic accountant laid out the financial wreckage. Grossman took the stand and wept as their text messages were displayed to a packed courtroom. A man who once said he loved her, now helping to convict her. Lauber described 3 trips to a gas station in Draper to buy the pills. Eric's friends and family testified that he had told them before he died that if anything ever happened to him, Kouri was to blame. And digital analysts walked the jury through the internet searches, the misspellings, the frantic questions, the glimpse into a mind that had already crossed a line and was now trying to understand whether it would be caught. The defense argued the evidence was circumstantial. No one saw Kouri administer the drug. They suggested confirmation bias. They even raised the possibility Eric had a secret drug habit. But Eric Richins had no known history of drug use. And 5 times a lethal dose is not an accidental figure. That is a number with intention behind it. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. 3 hours. After weeks of testimony, hundreds of exhibits, 40+ witnesses. Less time than it takes to watch a feature film. On March 16, 2026, when the verdict was read aloud, guilty, Kouri Richins bowed her head. Not a gasp, not tears, just a bowed head. Guilty of aggravated murder. Guilty of attempted aggravated murder. Guilty of forgery. Guilty of 2 counts of insurance fraud. The jury's verdict form specified the murder was committed for pecuniary gain, for money, and by means of a lethal substance. Outside the courthouse, Eric's sister Amy spoke to reporters, her voice steady but her eyes carrying the weight of years. Our focus, she said, is now on honoring Eric's life and supporting his voice as we all continue to heal. Kouri faces life in prison without parole. Her sentencing was scheduled for May 2026. The 3 boys were not in the courtroom that day. They are the ones who lose in every direction. They lost their father on March 4, 2022. And now they have lost their mother too, in a different but no less devastating way. Let us return, for a moment, to the book, Are You With Me? A gentle story about a boy who has lost his father. Written, Kouri said, to help her sons process the loss. She wrote it knowing, if the jury is to be believed, that she had created the very absence the book was trying to heal. She was the author of their grief and the author of their comfort at the same time. That is perhaps the most disturbing image this entire story produces. Not the pills, not the forged signature, not even the Moscow Mule, but a woman sitting down to write a book about helping children survive the loss of their father, when that father's loss was her doing. What keeps people up at night is not the crime itself, it's the ordinariness. Kouri Richins looked for years like a success story. Eric Richins looked like a solid, dependable man who happened to marry the wrong person. They raised their children together, sat at the same table, said goodnight under the same roof. It didn't start with fentanyl. It started with feeling trapped, with a gap between the life she had and the life she wanted, with the mathematical panic of owing $7.5 million while the neighborhood thought she was thriving, with an affair that felt like freedom, with the realization that divorce would take everything. Each of those things, individually, is something millions of people experience. Millions feel trapped in marriages. Millions struggle with debt. Millions fear financial ruin. Most do not go to a gas station in Draper, Utah to buy fentanyl. The question that haunts this case, the one that is ultimately unanswerable, is what is the difference between the people who pull back from the edge and the one who doesn't? Before he died, Eric Richins had told people. He told his family, if anything ever happens to me, she's to blame. He restructured his estate. He called friends after Valentine's Day saying he felt like he was dying. He knew on some level. He suspected. He said it out loud, and yet he stayed. He shared a bed with her. He drank the drink she made him. We want the world to be legible. We want danger to look dangerous. We want evil to announce itself so we have a chance to see it coming. But Eric Richins' tragedy, beyond the terrible fact of his death, is that sometimes the most dangerous place in the world is the place that is supposed to be the safest. Home, trust, a cold drink from the hands of someone who once promised to love you. She called herself a grief author. She meant it as an identity, as proof that something meaningful could rise from something terrible. But grief authorship in her case runs deeper than she intended. She authored the grief. She created the absence the book was trying to soothe. She constructed the wound and then handed the family a bandage. She poisoned the well and then stood at the edge offering cups of water to the people who were dying. And for just over a year, the world believed the performance, until the searches were recovered, until the housekeeper testified, until the former lover took the stand and cried, until the insurance papers were laid on the table, until the jury came back in 3 hours, until it was over. Eric Richins was 39 years old. He had 3 sons who loved him. He built things with his hands and believed in doing things right. He died in his own bed, in his own home, from a poison placed in a drink by someone he trusted. He deserved better. His children deserve better. And wherever they are tonight, 3 boys who lost their father and are now losing their mother to a different kind of absence. Whatever they're feeling, whatever questions they're carrying, they deserve people who will sit with them in the grief. Real grief. The kind that doesn't need to be authored. The kind that is just honest and heavy and real.